Life is a puzzle. It's far too complex of an affair for us to conceive or sort out by ourselves. You know what I'm talking about if you've ever attempted a 1,000-piece puzzle or more. You know you're probably going to need some help, or at least some encouragement to get it done. Someone to kind of sit and talk with you while you puzzle away. When all those colors blend together and you can't seem to find those missing pieces, you just need a second set of eyes, or perhaps a different perspective, to find that next match. In my house, the puzzle table is an open invitation to all, and it is visited by all of us, sometimes guests too at one point or another, with each of us playing a role, whether big or small, to help complete that picture. Yes, life is a puzzle, and we're all looking for just how do we fit. It can be a struggle to discover where we connect. Often we start by connecting with those pieces that are of closest proximity, our families. And still we look for greater belonging. And then we look at the greater picture and associate with others who look like us, who have the same hue or color. You know, if you've ever done a 1,000-piece puzzle, you get the plate out and you put all the colors together, right? And sometimes we find that we're just making ourselves fit into certain spots that are not perfect, but close. When we do, we discover that we're trying to adapt and to make ourselves fit, to fit in places we don't belong, that we actually break the puzzle. It's impossible to complete a puzzle when we're not playing our role, but rather masquerading as someone else. For puzzles are more than the singular piece looking for connection. Puzzles are about the whole. The last few years have been acutely puzzling for us humans. Pandemics, politics, and the corrosion of true sociality, civility, and society. With all the so-called social media, we created a malnourished culture where we crave cohesion, connection so dearly that we're willing to sacrifice so much to even get a glimmer of it. We've lost our sense of cohesion, a true culture of connection. Instead, we settle. We're used to settling these days. We no longer look for where we belong. We just want to be seen and affirmed. Maybe even for the negative actions instead of the positive ones. Whatever the platform, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, whatever the kids come up with next, each gives us a chance to like each other's posts and to have our posts liked by our friends in return. This sense of affirmation continues as we feel compelled to collect thousands of followers or fans or friends or whatever they're called, most of whom we've never met and never will. But it doesn't stop there. This quest for affirmation is everywhere. Sports programs routinely reward kids just for showing up with medals for participation. Ads are increasingly personalized using big data, tracking our every movement, targeting our particular tastes, and creating the impression that we are the most important customer in the world. All of this distracts us from a sense of true belonging and connection. One of the reasons I think digital platforms and social media in particular are powerful is precisely because they creatively offer affirmation in plentiful doses whenever we need a hit. Dopamine flows into our system when we get that nice like or a love, and so we keep jonesing for more dopamine. Deep down, of course, we know that this kind of affirmation doesn't mean all that much. Or at least it shouldn't. Many of the folks we encounter via the web, after all, don't really know us, and we don't know them. So how can their likes or hearts create any enduring sense of value or worth in our lives? And yet it's hard not to wonder what was wrong with the picture that we posted on Instagram if only 20 people liked it, when another picture garnered 200 likes. Is there something wrong with me? So while this affirmation may be somewhat superficial, it's at least better than nothing. And so we settle. We settle because we crave recognition and interaction, because we are at heart inherently social people. Almost every element of our being reflects God's observation in Genesis, that it is not good for us to be alone. And so the affirmation, relentless as it is ubiquitous, that social media offers us, creates the perception that we are linked to so many others. Indeed, that we are surrounded by a community of like-minded and likable friends, people that value us. But is that a perception or an illusion? Researchers like Professor Sherry Turkle of MIT, and author of Alone Together, have discovered that people today report feeling simultaneously more connected and lonelier than ever before. Why? Because while we crave affirmation, what we need is acceptance. Acceptance. What is acceptance? Acceptance, I want to be clear, is not the same as fitting in. Indeed, it's probably the exact opposite. To return to our puzzle metaphor for a moment, acceptance is not forcing a fit, but is instead finding the true connection that brings the whole into focus. For while fitting in is that skill we learned most keenly in adolescence and sharpened it into adulthood, is all about changing ourselves to be found acceptable by our peer group. Acceptance is simply and crucially being accepted and valued just as we are. No change required. No special Instagram filter. And there's nothing more important or necessary in leading a healthy or productive life than feeling accepted. Accepted for who we are. Which is where today's lessons are particularly helpful, I think. They assure us that God, the one who fashions the puzzle of life itself, is the very guarantor of our acceptance. This is what we hear as the prophet Isaiah says, "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." Did you hear that? You are called by name. You know how that feels. When someone speaks our name with love, we hear it with more than our ears. Our hearts feel that deep sense of belonging that we so crave. In being called, we find a sense of true belonging, a sense of community. Of course, it's why, as a community of faith, we read these passages again and again, year after year, because we need to hear them. It's also why we create rituals like baptism, so that we feel and directly experience affirmation and belonging at a personal level. On this annual remembrance of Jesus' baptism, we are again reminded that God accepts us. As we hear this story from Luke's perspective this year, there are a couple of things that stand out about this baptism story. First, prayer occupies a central role in this narrative. Prayer is a means of connecting with what's on our hearts and paying attention to the present moment in a deeper way. The text tells us that while Jesus was praying, the heavens opened up. That is, it was when he was praying that the Spirit came and baptism happened. This is an interesting fact or facet of Luke's telling of this story, because in this story, it is God who does the baptism. If you notice, there's no mention of John at this point. In fact, the 4 verses skipped in today's gospel tells the story of John becoming imprisoned. John is not even in the River Jordan anymore. Prayer. Prayer is the vehicle where we both express and experience our needs and feel God's presence. Of course, we have no idea what Jesus was praying about, but I have to imagine that he was yearning for connection and belonging, for a sense of purpose to figure out the puzzle of his life, just like we do. This is most of what prayer is, anyway. And I often think that poetry is a form of prayer, too. I recently discovered a poem by the New York State Poet Laureate Marie Howe called Singularity, after Stephen Hawking is the attribution. And I think it could have been a prayer that Jesus prayed or a prayer that you've prayed. I know when I first heard it, it brought me deeply into a place of prayer. It goes like this. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were. So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. Remember? There was no nature, no them, no tests to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reef feels pain. Trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean, and before that, to when sky was earth, and animal was energy, and rock was liquid, and stars were space, and space was not at all nothing. Before we came to believe that humans were so important, before this awful loneliness. Can molecules recall it? What once was, before anything happened? No I, no we, no one. No was no verb, no noun. Only a tiny dot brimming with is. All, everything, home. As Jesus was praying, the heavens opened up, and he heard something that we all long to hear, those homey words, I think, of belonging. In Luke's gospel, notice God's words to Jesus. They are personal, poignant, and powerful. You are my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased. Wrapped in those words of acceptance are the blessings of identity, worth, and unwavering regard. It is the desire behind Mary Howe's poem prayer, a sense of deep acceptance that leads to a place of belonging, behind and before all the division. A desire that is not based on fitting in, but on being part of a whole, that vulnerably draws us outside of ourselves while making more of us, individually and collectively. This is the puzzle of life that we're called to. Each of us playing a role in the picture that God created. And there is no doubt that this kind of belonging, this kind of being part of the puzzle, is a spiritual practice. It's the spiritual practice of believing in ourselves and belonging to ourselves so fully that we find that what's sacred is not only being part of something, like our DNA calls us to be, but also we find sacred the need to stand alone in our values and our beliefs and what we're called to. This is what baptism is all about. It provides us the affirmation we need to fully engage with the puzzle we call life. It allows us to play our role in all of its unique specificity, while also connecting to the greater whole. It allows us to wake up to the singularity we once were, to be the puzzle piece that we were created to be. As we courageously cling to our own sense of self, through baptism, God creates and fashions the most beautiful image of community we can imagine, a whole piece of individuals. A community that can affirm you and me without requiring any of us to fit in, to be forced to conform. Listen to God's words this morning. You, yes, you are the beloved, and with you I am well pleased. You are a piece in God's puzzle. God loves you. God's pleased with you. That's good news. Amen.